I wanted to just make a few comments about that Medicheck story that we told yesterday. Sorry for those who weren't at the satsangs, but I'll briefly say what the story was. Which there's this saint. This is a story that Master told. A saint named Saint Medicheck, and he must have been during World War II or something. He was going to a world, or maybe right before World War II actually. There was a peace conference in Geneva, and Medicheck was going to fly there to be a part of it, and he was a saint. Master called him a saint. I don't know if anyone called him a saint at that time. And so there was a huge storm though, and everybody told him don't go, and he even felt and had a vision not to go. But there was a high dharma to attend that peace conference. And so he decided to go anyway, despite having a vision of difficulties, despite everybody sending all their fear for it. And his own thought process is a lot of what we do. Very often we follow the law out of fear. And we also interpret the law. That is not necessarily God's way of interpreting that law. And so we get caught up in the law. So the law would say, don't go don't fly through that storm because you're going to have a disaster happen. And so then if something bad happens, you think, oh, see, I shouldn't have gone. Our mind we always want to be safe. We have an aversion to pain, which isn't a bad aversion, but it creates living in fear. So he chose to go anyway, but his thought process was very interesting. He said, well, if I go, I know it's a higher dharma. I know God's going to protect me and keep me safe. Then he said, well, then again, a lot of times people do something very brave and for higher dharma, and yet they still get cut down anyway. And then there's the other people who do great evil, and they don't get caught at all. So, he's going through this. This is what we all think constantly, every moment that we're trying to make a decision. We have these types of thoughts. That's why this is such a brilliant story, because Master is touching on every point we go through when we have fear about going into a situation. And we want to say, well, God will protect me. But in our minds, we think God will protect me means God will make everything comfortable and okay. And so when I do this great thing, I'm going to stay safe, right? And Master said, God does protect us, but not in the way we expect. So what happens, he's flying his airplane, and he's trying to get beyond the storm, but there's a rat on the airplane, and it's chewing through the wires. Now, of all the logical thought he did before he went on that trip about the storm, and the storm yes, and the storm no, and the storm yes, what was it? It wasn't the storm, it was this dumb rat. You see? We can never know. So what would he say? What would he have thought before? I shouldn't have done it because I knew something wrong might have happened, but I thought it was going to be the storm, not the rat. I was right. Something bad was happening. It was the rat, though. But we don't know these things. This is why we try to follow the law, to the letter, so that we can make sure we're safe, because, this law was maybe some philosophy or belief that a saint passed down, and I know because he wrote it, therefore it is. But we're not understanding that law in the way the saint gave it or in the way God gave it. We're understanding it through our own fear and limitation. So he's, on the plane and trying everything to get that rat off the plane. And he prays and guidance comes through. Raise the plane to a high altitude. So he does. He doesn't know why he's given that guidance. He just does. And then the rat dies because it was too high of an altitude for the rat. So he was guided in the middle of that illogical thing that happened. And this is how we are guided in our own lives. We can never anticipate what's going to calm our fears or any. There's just no guarantee in life. There's just no guarantee at all. I remember when I first read that story a long time ago, I was caught up in a cycle of fear about action and what to do and what is right and that kind of stuff. And that brought such a great relief to me, especially the way he thought through all the ways that I was thinking things through. And yet something completely unexpected happened, and yet he was protected by God. Because in every moment, if we are open to God's guidance, He will guide us. And it wasn't necessarily because he was going for this dharmic venture to a peace conference. He could have been going to the grocery store. But in every moment, God is there to guide us. Now, there might be times when God says, don't go. But he wasn't getting that. He wasn't hearing, don't go. The other key to this is the more subtle spiritual aspect of the story, which is when we are having disturbing problems in our lives, we very often feel, no, I'm not going to meditate right now because I got to really think through this problem that's going on. I got to really focus on this. Or there's so much emotional upset, there's not the ability to even sit and feel and even try to feel some calmness around the issue because there's just too much upset. And this goes around to the story of Lahiri Mahashaya saying Kriya Yoga solves everything. Because when Medichek rose up in his consciousness, the rat died. That rat are all the problems we think we have to look at and solve before we can take the time to sit and meditate. But Master was saying in that story, it's okay to just trust. Forget the rat in our life. Sit, meditate, go into higher consciousness. And he said it's really important. That's why regular meditation is so important. Because it's only through regular meditation that we gain the momentum to be able to rise into the higher stratosphere with our little plane. And when we're doing that, then the rat dies. It takes great determination and it takes great courage. It's not necessarily our first intention to say, I've got a fear. I've got to really look at my fear first. I've got to really understand my fear. I've got to do all this thing with my fear. Rather than trust and meditate. And then you go into even a slight state of higher consciousness and the fear is gone. Now, does that mean when you come out of higher consciousness, the fear is completely gone? Not necessarily. But if you keep meditating, then the fear will dissolve. Greater understanding will come as well. You see? So there's the normal human psychological process, which is to look at an issue, look at a problem, pick it apart, figure it out, all this stuff. There's the other way to handle it. Doesn't mean we don't look at ourselves and say, why did I react that way? What's going on? But in order to solve the problem, or in order to heal that problem, that when we just sit to meditate, then these things do dissolve over time. And when we get really high consciousness, like Dharmarajan was saying, then God will reveal so much. But it takes courage to skip the step of overanalyzing what the problem is. Because we feel we're making ourselves safe by looking at the problem and analyzing it over and over and over again. Usually the mind isn't happy just looking at it once and thinking it through. It's like, now wait a minute, now what was I thinking before? And I better think that through again. And then we kind of forget, and I better think that through again. And meanwhile, we're creating this groove in our brain for that fear. But it takes great courage to step outside of the box of law as we think we understand it and go towards just between us and God here. And we want to so badly control the world outside of us by following the law or by, behaving correctly so that everything will work out okay if I just, don't step on any lines. When I was a little kid, did you ever? Well, when we had sidewalks. Every neighborhood had sidewalks when I was growing up, and they all had lines. And so it said, step on a crack, break your mother's back. And so we're like, we're not going to step on cracks. We don't want to break our mother's back. I don't even know where that came from. Some of these things, I think, come from those really creepy childhood stories that the Germans invented. Little Red Riding Hood, those Hansel and Gretel with the witch in the oven, Little Red Riding Hood where the wolf eats the little girl. I mean, all these strange little things. Those stories were actually invented to make children behave. If you're not a good child, then, you're going to meet the evil witch and she's going to stuff you in an oven. That's how they dealt with children back then. Anyway, they're the ones that probably said, step on a crack, break your mother's back. So anyway, I just wanted to bring up that story again. It's worth meditating on, especially the thought process. Some people do great. Go for a really great thing and get stopped. And it's not because they did it in the wrong way either. Some people are evil and they get their way for a long time. Now we all know karmic law. And maybe that person who was really good and then got stopped, they're paying for some other lifetime when they weren't so good, and you never know. The thing is, life is just completely illogical. We think we can just define it through logic, and I follow this rule, and therefore, and this and that, and I do this. Even we can blindly believe in certain pujas or certain mantras without having really felt the effects ourselves, but because our mothers told us, if I do this one 108 times, then maybe I'll be able to finally, not have to deal with that one thing. And these blind beliefs, following the law, even why can't you use the left hand in things? If someone reaches for something in left hand, it was great to see everyone go, not the left hand, just like he was saying. But why? Why is that such a big deal? Now, in Indian society, especially in the early days, you wouldn't want to use your left hands for very personal sanitation reasons. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why these things go through society, And so it doesn't have to have a visceral reaction of, no! It should come from when I use my right hand, I feel that receptivity. How many of us feel that receptivity? How many of us just follow the rule of don't reach with the right or with the left hand? How many of us feel that Pingala current? How many of us feel, the receptivity? No, it's a law for most people. But if you're really going to follow it, and of course we want to be socially acceptable. That's why we've tried to strap our left hand, because when we were kids, no one taught us that, and there wasn't, we didn't feel a difference. But I think there is a truth in it, and that's why I'm willing to, be societal standard here in India, because I think there's a truth in it. And I would like to say that I definitely feel that current that's that way. But what really helps is Yogananda suggested it also, so I'm going to want to go for that also. But anyway, we have to rethink why we follow the law also. That's part of it. And reintegrate our own truth, God's truth, in these laws in order to make them non-superstitious for ourselves. We don't want to just do something because we're told to do it. Except, the guru. And when the guru tells us to do something a certain way, we do it. Now, he says also, test it out in your own laboratory of experience. So there may be something, you can be on the path a long, long time and not get every truth until, I'm sure there's truths now I don't know after nearly 25 years that I will understand in 40. And so it can take a long time. And so what do? Do I say, no, my guru, that didn't really work for me? No. I say, okay, I know he said that. I don't feel that yet, but I would like to at some point. I'd like to feel that truth because I know he's giving me the truth. Yoganandaji, Swamiji both said, when you don't feel the truth of something, put it on a shelf. And then, in a year, take it back off the shelf and say, how does that feel? They would say that a lot to people in America around reincarnation because, Christianity tried to obliterate the belief of reincarnation. So a lot of people it's a new concept to them. So they would come to Ananda and often say, well, I don't know what I think about that reincarnation stuff. And for those of us who've been Indians recently, it's like, how can you not? But you don't say that to someone who doesn't feel it. You say, well, then that part of the thing, of the belief or whatever, you don't have to believe in reincarnation to be able to actually practice Kriya Yoga. And so put that belief on a shelf for now and see what in a year what your experience brings. And very often people would come around and say, oh, after a year, even with the gurus on the altar, some people, especially in the West, they identified with Christ, and then they'd say, well, I don't know about Yogananda, but I know I like Christ. People here might say, well, I don't know about Christ, but I really like Babaji. That's what we get a lot here. And so that's fine. You put whatever I'm not sure about on the shelf, and you take all the rest that's good, and then later on, you say, like a year or two ago, I was really not. But then I meditated one day, and I had this big, huge experience of Christ consciousness. Oh, that's what they mean by Christ. That's what Master means by that. Oh, so now I take that box off the shelf, and I've got one less box on the shelf. It's okay to have boxes on the shelf. And that's part of testing the law. Does the law work for you or not? So anyway, I especially wanted to reshare that Medicheck thing because it has so many insights in terms of overcoming fear, whether we try and do something just out of fear or not. And once we do get into a situation, we can never anticipate what could possibly go wrong. And when something can go wrong, it will, very often. Isn't that one of the laws? Not Murphy's Law, but some other law. If something can go wrong, it will. I don't remember what that is. But very often with the mind, if the mind is the only thing engaged, it thinks everything's gone wrong. You walk into a room, oh my God, there's dust on the floor. That's wrong. We can identify wrong things everywhere. But we listen to that guidance, and we listen to it coming to us, and then we realize we are protected, just not in the way we expect. And in that way, we can move in our lives with a lot less fear And meditation, Babaji told Lahiri Mahashaya, this Kriya Yoga meditation can relieve people from dire fear and colossal suffering. And when I first read that story, I was going through a very fearful time. Just like fear for no reason. That fear for no reason is called existential fear. Fear because it's just fear. Fear because it's there. Fear because we want to control and not be hurt so much that we just live in that fear for a while. We go through phases. And so remembering that story brought such great faith. I had remembered that after reading it to everybody, and that's why I wanted to re-emphasize that story. So think about Medicheck the next time you have to make a decision, and really feel as though you can move through life with less fear. And this meditation that we're all practicing will really save us from dire fear and colossal suffering. And what a group can do together that has decided not to live in fear is very nice. To be around others who are also not living in fear. So many people come and talk about when I go home to my family, if someone was talking recently, when I go home to my family, the whole family is just full of turmoil and negative and even a little criminal aspect and all that kind of stuff. But when they come in here and they walk into this room, they feel that relief. And that relief is important in that it reminds us we don't have to live in that fear. And then, once we get strong through years and years and years and years of meditation and Kriya Yoga, then we ourselves become pillars that can affect the environment around us rather than get pulled into that environment.